Welcome, everyone, to this evening's seminar. My name is Jessie Lee McIsaac, and I'm an assistant professor and Tier 2 Canada Research Chair at Mount St. Vincent and the director of the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Centre. I'm really happy to welcome you all to our seminar tonight called How Are Maritime Families Experiencing the Pandemic? Strategies for Connecting with Families During COVID-19. So before we begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging that Mount St. Vincent University is in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So as mentioned, I direct the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Center, and our research center are the folks that are bringing you tonight's seminar. We are a research center at Mount St. Vincent University, and it is led through my research chair position at the Mount. I'm housed within the Faculty of Education and the Department of Child and Youth Study at the Mount. And our research looks at how we can go about engaging families, as well as partners in policy and practice in research and evaluation that looks at ways that we can enhance childhood well-being. So we do that through three pillars of work. First is leveraging family voice. The second is looking at population level evaluation. So really that means looking at existing programs and policies and trying to understand what we need to do to adjust them to better support families and children. And the third is knowledge mobilization. And that really is the pillar that brings us tonight's session. So we are hosting a seminar series that is focused on sharing knowledge and facilitating collaborations among those working in early childhood. And tonight's theme is looking at our research on COVID-19. So I'll pass it along to the coordinator of the seminar series, Sarah Morris.
All right. Hello, all. Thanks again for joining us this evening. I'm just going to begin here quickly with a little agenda and overview of what to expect tonight. So we're going to be talking about the COVID research project that is ongoing at our research center. So with that, we'll be discussing some of the findings that we have to date, as well as Madison will be sharing with you all some strategies for connecting with families during this time. After the presentation, we'll be going into breakout group discussions and coming back together after that for a whole group discussion, and then we'll have a quick wrap up. So this is just some virtual housekeeping. I think most of you, I don't think I've had a single person join that didn't automatically mute their mic. So it seems like most people are aware of where the mute unmute button is. If not, you can see, just wiggle your mouse around the screen and you'll see it along the bottom or the top, and it just looks like a little microphone. It's up to you whether you want to keep your camera on or off. We'll be sharing our presentation the whole time. You'll notice that most of us all will have our cameras off unless we're speaking. We ask that you communicate through the chat function. So there should be a little bubble at the top of your screen in Teams, and that is the chat function for Teams. And you can write in your questions, comments, feedback, anything right in there. If you do need to speak throughout or at the end of the presentation, there's also a raise your hand function, so you can feel free to use that. And also you can adjust your audio, camera, and mic settings through the device settings function. I also wanted to let you know, probably most of you have a little notification at the top of your screen letting you know that we're recording. So I will let you know that we are recording, but it is not able to see any of you as long as your cameras are off. The recording won't have any of your faces on there. It will just be our presentation and just for purposes of sharing this session with our broader population of followers on social media. So speaking of social media, if you do use Twitter or Facebook, please use the hashtags that are on the bottom of the screen here. Okay, and now I'm excited to introduce you to our presenter this evening. So Madison MacQuarrie is project coordinator for our ongoing COVID research project. She's also a health promotion graduate from Dalhousie University. So she finished her degree last year and has been leading the COVID work with our center from the get-go. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce you to Madison. Madison, in case you're speaking, you might be muted on here. Sorry, everyone, just hold on one moment. We may be experiencing some technology issues. Yeah, Madison, I can see your mute button looks like it's on there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Sorry for that. All right, well, thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. I am very excited to be here tonight and to share with you some findings from our COVID research project. So without further ado, let's get started. So as I'm sure we can all remember, COVID-19 was first seen in the Maritimes around this time last year. The provincial government was quick to implement social distancing advice in order to reduce community spread of the virus. This advice included avoiding group gatherings, having visitors in your home, sleepovers, play dates, going to public spaces such as parks, non-essential travel, and canceling athletic events. Shortly after this, on March 22nd, 2020, a provincial state of emergency was declared, enforcing social distancing. Prevention measures in the Maritimes resulted in a number of closures across the 3 provinces, including closures of schools, childcare, recreation, and other support services. So connecting this to early childhood, young children, sorry about that. Okay. Young children can typically spend a significant amount of time in different early learning environments that are available in their community, such as childcare or preschool, family resource centers, and early elementary school. The nature and quality of these physical and social environments in these settings are important for shaping a child's development and their long-term well-being. However, with the pandemic, children have been typically spending more time at home and with family, and then less time in the variety of early learning environments. We know that family is a key determinant of child well-being, and the family provides stimulation, support, role modeling, and nurturing care, all of which are crucial for healthy emotional, social, and cognitive development. So the 3 questions that we've set out to explore through our research are: 1, how has the COVID-19 global pandemic changed family life in the Maritimes? 2, how are parents with young children adjusting to family life in response to COVID-19 closures and physical distancing advice? And then 3, what supports are families currently accessing, and what other assistance do families need for their young children during the pandemic? So to answer these research questions, we've planned 2 surveys and 3 sets of interviews. We conducted our first survey in April and May of 2020, where more than 2,200 families with young children aged 8 years and under from around the Maritime provinces responded online about their early pandemic experiences. This survey explored how young children have been spending their time, the impacts on their routines, any emotional challenges, access to food and outdoor spaces, loss of supports for children, and changes to employment for parents. The survey also looked at how families were coping with their new reality and the unanticipated impacts on their family life, such as having more time at home together. So last week, we launched our second survey to build on our results so far and to explore how families across the Atlantic provinces have been adjusting to life during the pandemic following holidays and the second wave of COVID-19. The Atlantic bubble had opened following our first survey, so we decided to have the second survey open to all 4 Atlantic provinces rather than the Maritimes, because we felt that it was a great opportunity to explore more differences and similarities across and between the provinces. So if you're a parent and you'd like to take the survey, you can access it through the link on this slide there at tinyurl.com/family-COVID-survey. In July and November, 30 families, so 10 from each Maritime province, participated in telephone interviews. The same 30 families participated in each of those interviews. The first set of interviews built on the results of the survey and were focused on how families had been adapting to life during the pandemic once restrictions had started being lifted, as well as their initial experiences during the beginning of the pandemic. The second set of interviews were focused on how families had been adapting and adjusting to life during the pandemic as restrictions had been loosened for a few months, and as parents had to make decisions about what activities their children engaged in, such as school or childcare, sports or hobbies, or other recreational activities. In the spring, we plan to hold a third set of interviews with the same 30 families who participated in the first two sets of interviews to capture any adaptations at that time point. So as I mentioned, the first survey occurred in April and May when families were all still mostly at home. And the first set of interviews occurred in July when participants were kind of reflecting on the past few months while they were at home, but some restrictions had begun to lift and they were starting to settle into new routines. A lot of families had been affected by childcare closures, and many were working or studying from home while balancing parenting responsibilities and household responsibilities. And most people describe this as challenging. Most parents balanced work and caring for their children by flexing their work hours and splitting duties with the other caregivers in their house. While parents worked and completed household duties, children often engaged in independent play, organized activities, and screen time. Some of those who had children in school participated in at-home learning, and others substituted structured school activities for other learning opportunities such as exploring outdoors or baking. Most families reported quite a change in their home life and that they felt less rested and had less time for self-care and experienced a lot of parental guilt. However, lots of families discussed playing together more, cooking together more, and having more of a sort of slowed down lifestyle. Participants also discussed the difficulties of losing developmental supports and services and having them move online. And some families worried over their children's progress and their potential missed opportunities. During the second set of interviews in November 2020, families shared how they were adapting to changing situations during the pandemic. Families put a lot of thought into whether they would enroll their child in after-school activities. Some chose not to enroll their children in these extracurriculars to minimize contacts with others, and other families felt that extracurriculars were essential to their children's mental and physical health. While most parents were happy for their children to return to school and childcare, they reported an adjustment to new COVID protocols, such as mask wearing, a change in communication with ECEs and teachers, navigating guidelines for when children are sick, and having children at home more often for this reason. Developmental supports and services were reopening, and some were continuing through online interventions at this time, and participants were definitely happy to have these services back. So what now? How can you use this information to build a connection with families during this time? So through the rest of these slides, I'm going to share some common topics of discussion related to challenges that families have shared with us through this project, and some strategies, tips, and resources that you can use or share with families to help them through this time. So as you can imagine, many participants discussed feelings of stress, tension, worry, anxiety, and many other similar emotions due to the pandemic and the uncertainty they've been experiencing. So, for example, one parent said, "I'm good at coping with change, but it's ever changing, ever contradicting. It's exhausting, especially when you don't see the end in sight. So we're trying really hard not to let it get the best of us. It's like, okay, well, what if school gets canceled? What if a lockdown happens? What if you have to stay at home? Who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to do this? What if we can't get married?" All the things that make your brain turn and make you lose sleep. And, you know, that's your well-being too. Parents also talked about their child feeling stress and anxiety during this time due to all the changes they were experiencing. Another common topic in our first set of interviews in our first survey was that parents felt a sense of guilt during the pandemic. One parent stated, if you spend lots of extra parenting time, then you feel the guilt later on for not being as productive at work. So I try to compensate with extra hours. So in the end, I'm working longer hours than normal, and just really tired at the end of the day. Feelings of guilt were commonly expressed about the choices that families made to balance their work and parenting responsibilities, but also about other topics, such as complaining when they knew that other people were in what they felt like was a worse situation than them due to the pandemic, or if they were working outside of the home, many felt guilty for sending their child to be cared for by a family member while they were working because of their worry that they could spread the virus to this family member. In our more recent interviews, some parents felt guilty for not enrolling their children in extracurriculars due to COVID, or that their child isn't able to play in the same way that children would have been able to like a year or two ago. And they felt bad that they were missing out on different memories and experiences. When having conversations with parents, it's very important to recognize the feelings that parents are having during this time and recognize the diverse circumstances parents are experiencing. This will help build an empathetic and compassionate relationship with them and will help you both work together to support the children in your care. Compassion and empathy are the core emotions that connect us to each other. Without them, we lack the ability to respect others, protect them from harm, and respond to their needs. But with compassion and empathy, we're able to notice the struggles of others, feel concern for them, and take measures to help them out. So it's important as an educator to engage empathetically and with compassion in all family relationships. A high-quality parent-educator relationship is an important source of support for parents. Authentic and caring relationships are the foundation to a safe and caring childcare environment, and those relationships include the connections between you and the children as well as with their families. Strong supportive partnerships between families and school settings or early childhood settings have been shown to enhance children's learning and decrease behavior problems. Childcare staff and parents have the opportunity to work collaboratively to support children's development by facilitating smooth transitions and continuity of care for children between the home and childcare environments. Establishing partnerships with parents is an important step for educators in offering the best possible learning experiences and opportunities within their childcare center. Building that home childcare partnership is a process that demands time and commitment from both sides. So here are some quotes from participants of our interviews about how they've been experiencing communication with their child's childcare providers. One parent who had been experiencing really good communication said, "We'll do emails and they have an online app, so the teacher will upload some photos of the kids completing their schoolwork, and she also sends home a binder in my child's school bag. It's like a little plastic folder where the arts and crafts will come home, and we can communicate back and forth daily if we need to, but parent-teacher interviews, they were done by Zoom." Similar to this quote, there were many families who stated that they had wonderful communication with their child's childcare provider, and others who said their communication wasn't as great. So those who were comfortable with their communication often stated that they knew what their child was doing while they were at childcare or school. They knew about the COVID protocols in place and felt up to date with any changes and felt that they could have any questions that they had easily answered. Communication, they described, happened through a variety of means. Those who found they didn't have great communication often didn't know what their child was doing day to day and didn't have much or really any communication with their child's childcare provider through really any method of communication. So if you attended our webinar a few weeks ago, you would have heard some of these recommendations for ways to connect with families. You might already be communicating with families through these means, but here are some ideas or a refresher of ways to connect. So you could communicate with families in person, over the phone, either through a phone call or texting. You could hold individual virtual meetings with families or have virtual office hours. Communication by email is always great, both mass emails and individual emails. Many of you might use different apps, such as documentation apps or communication through social media apps like Facebook. You might also use old-fashioned paper communication like drop-off notes or drop-off materials or notes. And then newsletters are also a great way to keep families up to date, both virtual or paper. And another great way to send along a general update is to record a video and send that by email. In the bottom right corner of this slide, you'll find some resources that you can refer to related to this topic. So there are many resources provided in the links in the following slides, and so you'll receive this slideshow by email after the webinar, and you can access them there. So you might be looking for different ways to improve your communication with families, and here are a few easy tips for how you could get started. So to start off, you could schedule a quick brainstorming session with the staff at your childcare. It doesn't have to be long, even just 15 minutes would be great. So some topics you might want to discuss could include how do you want families to think and feel when they receive communication from your center? What topics do you want to communicate to families about? What frequency and communication channels do you think will work best? And what can you realistically commit to? And then do you need to make any adjustments to your typical communication channels to adapt to any changes caused by COVID? You might also want to consider sending out a short survey to families by email to learn what's really top of mind for them and what's most important for them to communicate with you about. And then also what communication channels do they prefer? So this will help you focus your efforts on where it really matters the most. So based on your brainstorming and the feedback you get from families, select 2 or 3 communication channels to focus on, or however many you've decided would work best for your center. Also decide on your frequency of communication from each of these channels and create a schedule or routine for communication, assigning specific individuals to each sort of touch point. So many families in our November interviews described the changes that they've experienced related to the new guidelines and restrictions related to COVID illness symptoms and having to keep their child home from school or childcare. So one participant said, "We went to childcare the first couple days, but then he got sent home the next week. So we spent the actual full week home with a runny nose. So that was an adjustment because before he didn't always get sent home with a bit of a drippy nose, right? That was more of a harder adjustment for me and my husband, like figuring out how this was going to work. Like, how are we going to make up all this time? It's the first full week of school and he's already missing, right?" So similar to this participant, a lot of parents were worried about having to take more days off of work than they usually would have due to their child's symptoms. Many participants stated that they've had to explain to their child why they now have to stay home with a runny nose, for example, where they would have likely still gone to childcare with a runny nose prior to the pandemic. Some of you may have heard from parents that their child's having a hard time understanding why they have to stay at home more often than before, or maybe come to you for help on how to explain to their child that they need to stay at home. If parents are having trouble explaining to their children why they can't go to school when they're sick, this is a great resource you could offer to them to use to help explain to their children why they aren't able to go to school or to childcare right now. You might also find this helpful for if you're explaining to children why others are missing from childcare. It's a scripted story from the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations called "Why Can't I Go to School?" The scripted story walks children through how they usually go to school or to childcare and what they do there, but then explains how germs can get passed around if children are sick. It explains how the child's teachers are still thinking of them, and when they're feeling better, they can go back to school. So the scripted story might not be enough to explain COVID-19 to older children, and families may benefit from other resources to help them explain COVID-19 to children. You might have seen a Facebook video that we posted on the ECCRC Facebook page of me explaining 8 tips for talking to children about COVID-19 in a little bit more detail than I will today. If you didn't have a chance to catch it, the link's at the bottom of this page if you would like to check it out. So these tips might be helpful for you as well to explain to children in your care or pass along to parents to use. So the first tip is to find out what the child already knows about COVID-19 by asking them some very open-ended questions and taking time to sit with them and listen to what they have to say about the virus. The second is to be honest and explain the truth about COVID-19 in a child-friendly way that's appropriate for the child's developmental level. Third is to remain calm when talking about COVID-19 to children and to others, because children can sense when you're worried. Fourth is to offer reassurance by letting them know that they're safe and by validating their fears. The fifth tip is to avoid language that might blame others for the spread of the virus. The sixth tip is to pay attention to what children hear. So you can listen for any chatter among kids about COVID-19, and it's great for parents to keep an eye on what children are seeing and hearing through TV, the radio, or other technology. Seventh is to show children how to protect themselves and their friends through frequent hand washing, mask wearing, and coughing in their elbow. And then lastly is to close conversations with care by making sure that children feel okay and safe at the end of the conversation, and to let them know that they can come to you or their parents or other adults in the future for any conversations on this topic. So there were several participants who discussed their child being okay with wearing a mask, but found that their child struggled to get used to this new habit and understand why they really needed to wear a mask. So one parent said the hardest transition for her was with regards to wearing a mask because she's 3.5. So that was really difficult to make her understand. And even to this day, she just complains that she can't breathe, and I don't blame her because I can't breathe either. But it's one of those things that we have to do. So here are some tips and resources that you can offer to parents if their child's having a tough time with their mask, or if there's a child at your child care center who's having difficulties with mask wearing as well. So recognize the feelings that children might have about masks. They might be excited or scared or annoyed or have many other feelings. So let the child know that whatever feelings they have, it's okay to feel that way. You can brainstorm things that they can do when they feel this way. For example, what can they do if they feel uncomfortable in their mask? Use masks in play. So children learn through play, and putting masks on stuffed animals or toys can help your child gain comfort putting on and taking off their mask. Through play, your child can practice explaining why wearing a mask is important and help their toy friends come up with ideas for working through challenging feelings. Next is talk about being a helper. So wearing a mask is one way your child can help your family, friends, and the people in your community stay healthy. So let your child know that this is one time when being a helper means keeping their germs and their masks to themselves. And then get comfortable with masks through arts and crafts. Create paper masks to decorate. Draw the shape of a mask on a piece of paper and together color, paint, or add stickers to personalize them. Cut out miniature masks to add to storybooks as you read together. And then lastly, practice mindful breathing while wearing masks. The way you breathe can impact the way you feel, so quick, fast breaths can lead to anxious feelings, and slow, deep breaths promote calm feelings. So with your child, practice taking slow, deep breaths while wearing your mask. Now, to wrap things up before the breakout rooms, learning how to tolerate the uncertainty that we are currently experiencing and navigating those adverse feelings is a huge part of building healthy coping skills. So one way you can help children, families, co-workers, or yourself cope with the stress and worry being experienced right now is to practice mindfulness. It's a great suggestion for focusing on the present moment and being thoughtful about how you or they are feeling at that time, especially when concerns about the future are so pressing. It really doesn't have to be complicated or take a lot of time. So here are some easy exercises that you can practice yourself with the children at your child care center if they seem to be experiencing feelings of stress, or you can suggest for parents to practice themselves or with their children. So first is squeezing your muscles. Start at your toes, pick one muscle, take a deep breath in and squeeze it tight, count to 5, breathe out and release, and then notice how your body changes. And then you can repeat this exercise moving up your body. The second is belly breathing. Put one hand on your stomach and one hand on your chest, and then slowly breathe in from your stomach And watch and feel it expand like a balloon. And then slowly breathe out and feel and watch it deflate. Then there's meditation. So sit in a relaxed and comfortable position. Pick something to focus on, like your breath. And then when your mind wanders, bring your attention back to your breath. You can also do a guided meditations that you can find on YouTube or using an app like Headspace. Another one is blowing bubbles. This is a great one for children. Notice their shapes and their textures and their colors. And then lastly, coloring. So color something and get lost in the activity. Focus on the colors and the designs. And this one's really great for all ages. So that is everything that I have for today. And it is time for the breakout groups.